Michael, I'm sad to say this, but I think you've got a bad case of Daniel Andrews derangement syndrome. Everything the Andrews government does, you seem to find fault with, my friend. I mean, they could come out with a cure to cancer and you'd find fault with it, I reckon. But I can tell you, if you want to see a bad case of maladministration, then you need to look no further than the Morrison government's handling of the vaccine rollout. This week, we learned that the federal government will limit the AstraZeneca vaccine to the over 60s and effectively phase it out in Australia. Now, this is a disproportionate response, something I hear you talk about all the time, Michael, to the risk posed by the AstraZeneca vaccine. 2 people in Australia have died from blood clotting after 3.8 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine were delivered. This makes the likelihood of dying from the AZ vaccine about 0.5 in a million, or if you prefer whole numbers, about 1 in 2 million. As you can see in this graph, the risk of dying from the AZ vaccine is far lower than many activities most of us do every single day. In fact, the risk of dying from the AZ vaccine is similar to the risk of being killed by lightning in Australia in the course of a year. And this pales in comparison when compared to other risks, such as the risk of dying in a car accident, a pedestrian accident, or that you might be a victim of a homicide or a drowning. When you fully appreciate how small the risk of blood clotting is, the decision to have the AstraZeneca vaccine to protect yourself and others becomes a pretty easy one to make. And yet, on the advice of a Targi, the Morrison government is phasing it out. And what has not been properly debated are the real consequences and the real costs for Australia and our way of life of this decision. Australia is already woefully behind countries we usually compare ourselves to when it comes to the vaccine rollout. As a result of the AstraZeneca decision, we will now need to wait until late this year until supplies of alternative vaccines arrive. This will inevitably delay the opening up of Australia to the world well into 2022. It will also mean that we will continue to experience lockdowns like the one that Sydney is in right now. The United Kingdom has now vaccinated over 80% of its population using the AstraZeneca vaccine. Today, the British government announced global flights for vaccinated Brits are to resume to a whole raft of new countries within weeks. That's a country that's vaccinated. That's a country that is opening up again. It could have been the same for Australia if the government had not bungled the vaccine rollout.